The series of events leading up to the December 7th, 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor are meticulously and dramatically retold in Darryl Zanuck's 1970 film, Tora Tora Tora. The magnitude of producing such a film has to be considered one of Hollywood's most unique and challenging undertakings for a number of reasons. The film took almost 3 years just to research, plan, and develop before a single foot of film was shot. The 8 months of actual shooting time began in 1968. Development of the film had begun back in 1966. This may have set a record at the time for its time stretch from the planning in '66 to the release in 1970. This Hollywood film was the first collaborative work ever by two former bitter enemies. In reality, the motion picture was created from two separate productions, one based in the United States and the other in Japan. The two completed films were edited together chronologically, which resulted in the frequent switching back and forth. Developing the film this way fulfilled Zanuck's wish for the viewers to have the opportunity for a perspective of the events that unfolded from both nations. Tora is a Japanese word meaning tiger, but the full phrase is an abbreviation meaning lightning attack. On December 7, 1941, it was used as the code word to indicate that complete surprise had been achieved. The primary sources for the film were two studies done by prominent historians. Each had devoted years of painstaking research and probing into various aspects surrounding the day of the attack. Tora Tora Tora, written by George Prange, is a significant work that was the product of more than 17 years of research. He had been the head of the Pacific Theater Historical Division in Tokyo from 1946 to 1949 under General MacArthur. During this assignment, and for many years afterwards, he searched deeply into the true, accurate story of Pearl Harbor. From the Japanese side, he pored over thousands of documents and interviewed almost every Japanese officer who played a role in the attack. The second source was a work done by Ladislas Farrago titled The Broken Seal. Following years of his own meticulous research, this book revealed for the first time the story of the Japanese and the American code-cracking operations between 1921 and 1941. The book provided the basis for the film's authentic portrayal of the events in Washington, D.C. during the crucial weeks and hours preceding the attack. Producer Elmo Williams wanted to make the film as historically accurate as possible. After receiving the initial screenplay by Larry Forrester and two Japanese collaborators, he personally sought out Prange. He asked him to check the script scene by scene for accuracy. After doing so, he made a number of corrections, along with many suggestions for the script. The United States half of the film was directed by Richard Fleshner of Dr. Dolittle and the Fantastic Voyage fame. The Japanese side was directed by Akira Kurosawa, who had worked on the script development and pre-production for 2 years. During his 2 weeks of shooting, he attempted to cast friends and business associates, including some really high-level industrialists, into key roles in the film in the Japanese segments. And he did this as a favor for later funding of future films. 20th Century Fox was not amused by this act. The breach between them and the director became the cause for his dismissal from the project. He was then replaced by Toshio Masuda and Kenja Fukasaku, who ended up co-directing the Japanese side together. The movie has almost a documentary feel to it, and as you might imagine, it is far more plot-oriented than character-centered. From the onset, the film was deliberately cast with actors, both American and Japanese, who were not true box office stars. Many of the Japanese actors were actually amateurs, though the film does boast 2 Oscar winners, that being Jason Robards Jr. and Martin Balsam. Probably one of the most recognizable names and faces are those of American actor E.G. Marshall and James Whitmore. Actor Jason Robards was one of the many cast members who served in World War II. However, on the morning of December 7th, he, then a radio operator in the United States Navy, witnessed the actual attack on Battleship Row from his ship. He was the only main actor to film on location in Hawaii. When he arrived, the production crew was filming one of the aerial attack sequences, and Robards was noticeably shaken as he was reliving the moment. The line from the movie that we have all become familiar with is from the mouth of the Japanese actor So Yamamuro. He portrays Admiral Yamamoto. After receiving applause from an admiring staff, he solemnly confesses, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve." Richard Fleshner admits that Yamamoto more than likely never said those words. Producer Elmo Williams claims to have found those words written in Yamamoto's diary, and screenwriter Larry Forrester claims to have found a 1943 Yamamoto letter with the quote. However, neither diary nor letter has ever been produced as evidence. It may possibly be a dramatized misquote from a portion of the letter he sent a month after the attacks. He wrote, "A military man can scarcely pride himself on having smitten a sleeping enemy. I would rather you make your appraisal after seeing what that enemy does, since it is certain that, angered and outraged, he will soon launch a determined counterattack." 3 years of prep work seems like an unbelievably long amount of time to invest into a single motion picture. But it took every day of those 3 years to ready the production on both sides of the Pacific. Extensive and exhaustive research, writing, rewriting, and even more rewriting, hunting and gathering of World War II uniforms, vehicles, ships, aircraft, searching and authorizing the use of authentic locations, the extensive planning for the apparent repeat destruction of Pearl Harbor engulfed the days, even months at a time. We'll mention just 2 memorable sequences from the film. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk fighter was chosen and used to depict the U.S. defenders of the attack. A full-scale P-40 was used as a template for fiberglass replicas, some of them with working engines and props, that were bombed and blown up during the filming. But even with all the research, planning, and precautions taken, all things do not happen as they're envisioned. Director Richard Flesher said that the memorable scene of the P-40 crashing in the flight line was an unexpected event. The plane, which was one of the lightweight mock-ups, was radio-controlled and carried a radio-controlled explosive charge. When one of the enemy planes flew over, it created a vortex that caused one wing to lift and sent the plane into the direction of the other P-40s. Knowing that those planes were surrounded by cast extras, the producer feared a horrible disaster. So he triggered the remote charge early. The memorable image of the propeller spinning off was unintended. It just happened as pure luck. Those stuntmen and extras you see frantically scattering in the film were actually running for their lives. The African-American messman seen shooting at the Japanese planes is based on Seaman First Class Dory Miller, who was stationed on the USS West Virginia. He was the first Black American to be awarded the Navy Cross. the second highest decoration of valor in combat after the Medal of Honor. He not only assisted several wounded sailors, including the captain of the ship, but he also, without any training, fired an unattended machine gun, downing Japanese attacking planes until it ran out of ammunition. I hope this video has whet your appetite to eagerly learn more about the movie and the event which it attempts to retell. Even to this day, the attack on Pearl Harbor remains a continual, endless story. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.